Well, a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Express Lunch right here on Channel 405, ANN7. Do remember to follow us on social media. That would be ANN7 TV and myself, Nandine Doni. These are your headlines. Easter weekend road fatalities register a sharp rise of 51% this year, with 235 deaths. Fatalities go up in all provinces except Free State. ANC condemns Ayanda Mabulu's work in the strongest terms, but for now the party is not taking any legal action against the artist. Nelson Mandela Foundation says the painting is distasteful. President Jacob Zuma delivers eulogy at Ontlametse Palatse's funeral. Remember her as articulate and full of life. Hundreds bid farewell to one of South Africa's bravest daughters. France is on high alert after a gunman ambushed 3 Parisian police officers, killing 1 and wounding 2 others in what the country's president called a terrorist attack. Health Professions Council of South Africa is delivering a judgment in Tim Noakes' case. Now, the Association of Dietetics of South Africa accused Noakes of unprofessional conduct following a tweet in which he told Pippa Leenstra to wean her baby onto a low-carb, high-fat diet. As listed on the green list in Noakes' book, Real Meal Revolution, let's go live and listen.
Intended to convey by the use of the acronym LCHF, or what exactly the respondent meant by key is to wean baby onto LCHF. Neither would anyone have known what the definition of proportions or percentages of an LCHF diet is in the context of complementary feeding or weaning. The undefined use of the acronym in the circumstances indeed permits an extremely wide interpretation. This committee thus agrees with the pro forma complainant that there is ambiguity in the respondent's reply and tweet. However, the law does not and cannot protect every user in cyberspace from themselves, their ignorance, or downright absurd behavior. If anyone had wanted more information, they could simply have tweeted and asked and hoped for a timeous, intelligible, and an unambiguous response, for nothing is guaranteed. They could also have Googled, blogged, or used other internet and or social media platforms, or not. They could have likewise made appointments and consulted with dietitians, medical practitioners, and other healthcare practitioners in a traditional professional setting, or not. If they randomly followed any cyber advice or information out of context, and without a clear understanding of the actual nature of the advice or information, and even misunderstanding same, it was at their own peril. It has been said that Dr. Google can vacillate between a diagnosis of a mild headache to clinically dead with a few clicks of a mouse. This committee disagrees that the respondent, by tweeting as he did, thereby intended to dilute the breastfeeding message. This is not the only reasonable inference to be drawn in the circumstances. In fact, the respondent, if anything, would appear to be very supportive of and not at all undermining of breast milk, based on his praise thereof in the tweet. There's nothing to suggest that he was advocating immediate cessation of breastfeeding, discouraging breastfeeding, or had a problem with breast milk. Even Professor Kruger commended him in this regard during her testimony. This committee disagrees with the pro forma contention that concessions made by the respondent during his testimony, that what was missing from the tweet was an indication that the key was to wean the baby onto LCHF sometime in future, that he should, hindsight being a perfect science amidst the confusion, preferably have used the terminology real foods instead of LCHF, amounted to proof or admission of unconventional advice. In any event, it is common knowledge that babies will grow and become adults and have to be weaned from the breast at some stage and complementary foods introduced. As far as Professor Pienaar is concerned, Professor Pienaar referred to literature and opined that the respondent's actions amounted to so-called affirmative action, and by tweeting in the manner in which he did, a doctor-patient relationship was formed, whereupon the respondent incurred certain duties and obligations as a medical practitioner. He was also of the opinion that there was serious potential harm caused by the respondent in the circumstances, and he was extraordinarily concerned with the theoretical risk to poor, vulnerable, unsuspecting public and patients in cyberspace. This committee cannot agree with his opinion in relation to the actual facts of this case. Furthermore, to even remotely regard the responding tweet of the respondent in the circumstances as affirmative action and the crucial moment when a doctor-patient relationship was formed. Is antiquated at best and certainly not in keeping with the Constitution, the information technology explosion, or social media trends. There was also no potential harm proven. This committee does not dispute the veracity of the literature quoted by Professor Pienaar, only the application of the literature and ethics by Professor Pienaar to the facts in this matter. The inferences drawn by Professor Pienaar are not consistent with the proven facts. The proven facts do not exclude another or other reasonable inferences, save the inferences sought to be drawn by Professor Pienaar. Information sharing, media and social media is no longer what it was. Not too long ago, the social media explosion of today was not envisaged, and if it was, considered to be the figment of a very disturbed imagination. It is not unheard of that conventional science and medicine may become bad and even mad science or medicine. Something initially considered outrageous may, on the other hand, subsequently become established practice. History is indeed riddled with examples, some rather extreme. A good example is that of Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, the father of the germ theory, and early pioneer of antiseptic procedures. He introduced hand disinfection standards in obstetrical clinics. He was severely ostracized by his peers and society, even after he had proven how he could prevent infant mortality. He spent his last days in an asylum at a relatively young age. Today, it is established practice to follow his protocol and scrub and hygienize, and so prevent the spread of germs causing infection, disease, and death. We live in a dynamic, not static environment. Humans are ever evolving, as is knowledge related to medicine, science, and technology. Unconventional does not equate per se to unprofessional. It would depend on the facts in a particular case. On the evidence before this committee, it cannot be found that the pro forma has proven on a balance of probabilities that the respondent gave advice or information on Twitter which was not evidence-based. On the facts and all the expert evidence tendered, it would appear that the respondent's advice was sufficiently aligned to prevailing South African pediatric dietary guidelines at the time, such that the only reasonable inference to be drawn is not that the advice was or could be deemed to be unconventional. In any event, whether or not the advice or information was conventional really only becomes relevant if this committee finds on the facts that the respondent was indeed acting in his capacity as a medical practitioner. After hearing all the expert evidence, it is clear that the issue of the LCHF diet is complex and an evolving field of science and nutrition. While the committee is aware of evidence that there is a strong link between diet and the fast-growing global challenge of obesity and illness, this committee cannot pronounce upon the LCHF diet as such, or the relationship between infant and adult nutrition. This committee makes no credibility finding as far as any of the nutrition experts is concerned. And in terms of the case law relating to expert testimony, and quoted above, and on totality of all the expert evidence presented before this committee, it cannot be said that testimony of the respondent and his witnesses do not also have a logical basis. Summary. The majority of this committee, being 4 of the 5 votes, find the following on the facts. 1. The pro forma complainant has not proven, on a balance of probabilities, that the respondent was acting in his capacity as a medical practitioner, or in any dual or multiple capacity, which included the capacity of a medical practitioner, when he tweeted Ms. Leenstra on 5 February 2014. Secondly, on the probabilities, the respondent was acting as an author and proponent of the LCHF diet. 3. The pro forma complainant has not proven, on a balance of probabilities, that the respondent gave medical and/or clinical and/or medical nutritional advice and/or medical nutrition therapy when he tweeted Ms. Leenstra on 5 February 2014. 4. On the probabilities, the respondent provided information to Ms. Leenstra as an author and proponent of the LCHF diet. At best, his response was ambiguous and not a direct response to her query. At worst, the response, without clarification, may be interpreted as confusing or unclear. To understand the response properly and the context of the LCHF diet, there would have had to have been meaningful dialogue between Ms. Lenstra and the respondent. It is common cause there simply was none. 5. The pro forma complainant has not proven the existence of a doctor-patient relationship on a balance of probabilities. 6. On the facts and probabilities, there was indeed no doctor-patient relationship. 7. The pro forma complainant has not proven on a balance of probabilities that the respondent contravened any law, regulation, or ethical rule. It has certainly not proven on a balance of probabilities a contravention of regulation R237 of 6 March 2009, in that this committee could not find on the facts that the respondent advised or diagnosed anyone or any baby on his or her physical health status. 8. The pro forma complainant has not proven on a balance of probabilities that the respondent gave unconventional advice or advice which is not evidence-based. 9. On the facts, this committee finds that no actual or potential harm was proven, neither that any information provided on Twitter by the respondent, whether unsolicited or not, was dangerous or life-threatening. 10. The pro forma complainant has thus not proven on a balance of probabilities that the respondent, as a medical practitioner, acted unprofessionally and in a manner that is not in accordance with the standards and norms of the medical profession. Professor Noakes, on a charge of unprofessional conduct, the majority of this committee find you not guilty. Judgment will be read by Dr. Little. Dr. Little, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Would you please switch that on and close? Sorry, let them just, if they need to record it, give them a minute or two if anyone needs to move.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be long, so definitely just a couple of pages. I firstly wish to apologize to all the legal practitioners present.
Sorry, before you continue, sorry. Let's first let the gentleman continue. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry,
I don't accept the term judgment. Although I'm in a minority, I cannot presume to profess a judgment. And all I sort of wanted to do was to sort of give my reasons why sort of really it's I have voted against the rest of the committee. Firstly, when looking at the charge, Advocate van der Nest in the final submission, sort of really it's point 8.2, advised, and I think that was the only applicable point, that it was that we should consider that it was unconventional in the sense of not being evidence-based and that it did not conform to the guidelines referred to. That I think was the only applicable advice. I don't think any of the others really sort of really could be used in determining. I felt that the pro forma in the evidence and submissions had conclusively shown that the respondent is registered as a medical practitioner, right? And I just want to put in brackets a jurisdiction, and provided sufficient evidence to compel me to vote that Professor Noakes be found guilty as charged. The pro forma presented evidence regarding jurisdiction that by virtue of Professor Noakes' registration, the HPCSA had legal jurisdiction. And also that the respondent was allowed ample opportunity to contest this point. It is interesting to consider that if that opportunities had been used and if it had been proven that there was no jurisdiction, this case would have ended at the beginning. And it's open to speculation, sort of really why the respondent did not exercise or argue that point. The